before we let you celebrate and talk about the big celebration that's going to be headed down towards Sanford Stadium coming up this weekend, just break down what happened, because these were two heavyweights going at it blow for blow. And, of course, Alabama took an 18-13 lead after the controversial call on Stetson Bennett, completion or a pass attempted or fumble. So that went Bama's way. They take the lead in the fourth quarter, and then Georgia responded.
It was a great game all the way around, right up until the very end of the game where it started to get away from Alabama. There were several times in this game where I could just feel that old feeling of defeat sneaking up on me again, and I just didn't see the offense doing as near as much as I thought they were going to do. First part of the game, we went into the locker room at 6-9, and I was just thinking in my head, traditionally Georgia really struggles in the second half, especially against Alabama. And there's been times we've went into the locker room with a pretty substantial lead and not been able to hold on to it. So this time we were going into the locker room with, a deficit. So it was pretty concerning at that point. Then we come out and the game seems to pick up a little rhythm in the third quarter for Georgia. Georgia somehow managed to hold Alabama to, I believe, 0 points in that quarter. And then in the fourth quarter is when all the fireworks happened. It was just really, really exciting football at that moment. And I had given up on Stetson Bennett. I had absolutely given up on him. And he didn't give up. He never gave up. And because he never gave up, because he never folded up shop, and even a lot of five-star quarterbacks at that point probably would have kind of given up. He hung in there, and he continued to play his tail off. Whenever that controversial fumble / incompletion was made, the next drive he went 4 for 4 and went 80 yards down the field, 4 passes back to back to back, and they were not check down passes. They were big boy passes. And it was almost like they had saved the best for last. Now, if you'd have told me at the beginning of this game that Georgia was going to be going into the fourth quarter going into the locker room at halftime losing, I'd have been like, yeah, I can see that happening. But then to tell me that Georgia was going to score 20 points against Alabama in the fourth quarter, I'd have said you were crazy. If you'd have told me one was going to come off of a pick six of a Heisman Trophy winner, I'd have said that's not going to happen either. So the Georgia defense and the Georgia offense both continued to surprise me throughout that game. Just absolutely incredible game to watch.
Yeah, it was a fun one to watch. Definitely the two best teams in the country trading haymakers, and you just saw a ton of superior athleticism on both sides of the ball. And again, credit to Stetson Bennett, as you mentioned, taking a difficult situation and the adversity of a call that I'm not going to call it as a blown call. I think it could have gone either way. I don't think it was a bad call, but it wasn't an obvious call by any stretch. It could have been called either way in regards to incomplete pass or fumble. And, I had no emotional stake in the game, Brett, but at the same time, when you say that you had that negative feeling creeping back up on you, I even thought that because I was comparing that call to the one in the first drive of the game where Georgia got a hold of Bryce Young, and he basically did the same thing Stetson Bennett did, just in desperation, just was trying to unload the football in any way possible, and he basically spiked it on the ground. That could have been called a fumble. If anything, it could have been called intentional grounding, but it just turned out to be an incomplete pass, and Alabama was able to turn it into a field goal drive. And I just thought when the Stetson Bennett play happened and that call came down, there we go. Bama does it. They get the call go their way. Then Georgia does it, and they get the call against them.
Well, there's a whole lot of truth in that statement, but I think there's a lot more that goes along with it. And this may be in poor taste towards some Bama fans, and I don't mean for it to be that way. I mean for this to be something that we should, as fans, we should try to encourage this to be addressed. I've said quite a few times, and I'll say it again. It doesn't make sense to me that we have the number and problem of officiating rules or rulings that we have, especially in big games. There have been, in today's modern day and age of technology, we've got more cameras than you can imagine. You can see just about every single position 360 degrees in super slow-mo. But it continues to be the judgment calls that some of the referees are making that seem to be a little inconsistent. Now, even though Georgia won this game by a pretty fair margin, I'm still not content with the way it was officiated, and that includes some of the calls that went against Alabama. There were times whenever I personally thought that some of their receivers got held and it didn't get called. So I just can't understand for the life of me how you have a referee who, once the ball is up in the air, it's his job to turn and see what's going on with the receiver and the defender. And there was one particular play where a Alabama receiver, the Georgia defender, had actually grabbed his arm and pulled his arm backwards. His arm was, Georgia had him behind the back, and the referee didn't call the flag. And I'm like, wow. And while I don't mind winning the game, I don't want it to be a game that things like that continue to happen. The incomplete, I really think that the incomplete that Bryce Young threw at the beginning of the game was just that. I think that was an incomplete pass. I feel like that was the right call for it to be incomplete. I certainly feel like he threw that ball trying to avoid a sack, and the running back in the area didn't make sense to me because that he wasn't trying to throw that ball to the running back. He threw that ball to keep from getting sacked. That's the reason for the rule. I think Stetson Bennett probably did the same thing. I feel like he was trying to throw that ball to prevent the sack, especially being that close to the goal line. And in my opinion, I think that if you're doing this, if it's a throwing motion, whether or not your arm is doing this, if you're doing this and then you throw the ball, the arm is still going forward. The ball can't go forward unless something's making it go forward, and there's only two things touching it, and that's fingers and a palm. So if he had enough on it to get that ball to go forward, it's very difficult for me to believe that was entirely just a fumble. So, but they certainly can do a better job officiating, and I don't know what the solution is to that, but I don't want to see any game where things like that continue to happen throughout the game.